All right, take two. Welcome to Critical Wade Theory. Today I want to talk about a band that barely existed. They released one album, toured sparingly, and still managed to leave a permanent mark on independent music. That band is the Postal Service. And if you were paying attention to indie music in the early 2000s, you almost certainly heard them. And if you didn't know their name, you most likely heard their songs. Again, if you were paying attention. The Postal Service formed in 2001 as a side project. On one side was Ben Gibbard, already gaining attention as the voice of Death Cab for Cutie. On the other was Jimmy Tamborello, an electronic producer working under the name Dental. And I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, so forgive me for that. A lot of artists come up with these cute names for themselves, and I mispronounce them. But moving on, they weren't trying to start a band in the traditional sense. This was more like two people trading ideas because they liked how the other worked. At the time, broadband internet was not a given, so instead of sitting in a room together, they sent music back and forth through the mail. Tamborello would mail instrumental tracks, Gibbard would add vocals and lyrics, then send them back. That process inspired the name of the Postal Service. Well, that's like a tongue twister for me. But anyway, ironically, in a small but funny detail, they apparently used FedEx or UPS instead of the actual U.S. Postal Service. But that's a little bit of a quirky bit of trivia, I suppose. Still, the name stuck and it fit the music well enough, so they have stuck with it. They have not changed the name of their group, and why would they? It sounds nice. So in 2003, they released Give Up. It would be their only studio album. On paper, it sounds simple indie pop, synth pop, electronic music with some guitars occasionally sneaking up on you in the background. But the execution was, very good for the listeners out there, and the side project became pretty popular and respected. Tamborello's production was glitchy and digital. You had programmed drums, shimmering synths, stuff that a lot of people still love. Gibbard's vocals were warm, emotional, and they had that sort of unmistakable human quality that a lot of people identify with. He sang about very common themes in music like love, distance, regret, hope, all that kind of stuff, and often in plain language that felt, a little on the conversational side. And a lot of great music is like that. And the dynamics is what made it work. Songs like Such Great Heights became instant classics for some people. It's a bright and romantic song on the surface, yet there's a nervous energy underneath it, like someone trying to convince themselves everything will be okay, or something like that. A lot of emotional music kind of has that. And for some reason, synth pop quite often has a little bit of a moodiness to it. And this song is no exception to that. And there's a song called The District Sleeps Alone Tonight, which is, a little quiet, sort of lonely sounding. It sounds like walking through a city late at night when everyone else has already gone home. It's a scenario that I'm familiar with, although, admittedly, the world doesn't sleep alone that often. Um, you know, a lot of people are out there when I'm out walking at night. So maybe that wasn't the best metaphor for me to use. It seems like you can never go that far without encountering people. I guess I'll just say it like that. But the song does convey sort of a lonely quality in a way. Another track, We Will Become Silhouettes, is electronic, a little bit playful from what I recall, and it carries a familiar sense of melancholy. And the album didn't it didn't just do well, it became a cult classic. It's a very popular album. You might find their tracks having like 100,000 likes on YouTube, which frankly, a lot of even well known artists will not always get those kind of numbers of likes. So, yeah, this is a very popular side project. Give Up went on to become one of Sub Pop's best selling records of all time, second only to Nirvana's Bleach. And, Nirvana's Bleach is actually a pretty big album after Nevermind, of course. The original release of Bleach wasn't so popular. It wasn't as big as the the follow up to Bleach. But if you're only in second place to one of Nirvana's albums, you're doing pretty good. So it's not bad for a side project that wasn't supposed to be permanent. And Jenny Lewis is also a member of the group. She played a role in the band's sound, best known as the frontwoman of Rilo Kiley. She contributed backing vocals that added texture and warmth to several tracks. So, I'm not trying to sidestep acknowledging her as a contributor here. Her career path is a story of its own, really. Before music, she worked as a child actor, appearing in commercials for things like Jello, Barbie, Toys R Us, and even a Black and Decker popcorn maker. So by the time she was singing with the Postal Service, she'd already lived a few different creative lives. And despite the album's success, the Postal Service didn't rush to follow it up. And in fact, they haven't done any other material. They barely toured at all in the early years. And I guess part of that was scheduling. Death Cab for Cutie was becoming huge. Tamborello had his own projects. And part of it was intention, perhaps. This was never meant to be a long term band or anything like that. In 2013, they reunited for a short tour to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of Give Up. Fans finally got to see the album performed live from front to back, so that was nice. And after that, Ben Gibbard made it clear there wouldn't be a second album. He said, "I think it would be a disappointment even if we tried." So he shut down any sort of rumors of that for a long time. And I'm sure they have their reasons for that. It's an honest statement. He's no teasing, no vague promises, just a recognition that some things are better left untouched. And maybe that's part of why the Postal Service still matters, because there's this, I guess, limit to them of that one album that they put out. I guess, it's a little bit like the Sex Pistols or something like that. The Sex Pistols only released one official album, and I guess that's part of their charm as well. Now, you have other albums that, like compilations that are about the Sex Pistols, but, you know, that's technically not like their official album. And, this short run left a big mark. You can hear their influence in other independent and electronic acts, and they helped normalize the idea that electronic music could be emotional, vulnerable, and intimate without needing a strict genre label. So that's kind of nice. I sometimes like the idea of just putting genre aside and letting the music emerge sort of naturally without a lot of preconceptions. And to me, that's kind of what it sounds like this is, and there's no need to give everything a name like that. We don't always have to force a movement into coming into shape. Sometimes just record what comes naturally to you, and you might find some interesting stuff that can happen. So the Postal Service existed briefly, did exactly what it needed to do, and then stopped. One album, a handful of tours, songs that still feel strangely personal all these years later, and sometimes that's enough. So that's my take on this group. I don't know. I'm sure I will still have some people who are like, "Ah, you should have mentioned this," or "Why did you bring that up?" or whatever. Everybody has their critics, and I'm reminded of that constantly on YouTube with the comments. You say one little thing wrong or something, and there's finger wagging at you, and I try not to let that get to me, but I do become aware of that as the episodes roll out, and I do kind of see what people are saying. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, whatever. And yeah, if you feel like it, you could like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. It's up to you. And well, maybe I should say it's not up to you. Maybe I should like crack the whip and say you got to do it, you know. No supper for you if you don't hit the subscribe button, you bastards. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you bastards. I take that back. You're obviously great people out there. I love you all. Well, that sounded insincere. Well, that's because it is. I'm technically talking to myself right now, by the way. I'm just talking to my laptop microphone. Isn't that weird? How it's like I'm supposed to be talking to a person, but it's really just me talking off into like the void of existence itself. Oh no. Oh no. I guess I'll end the episode. I went off on a bizarre tangent and I don't know how to properly stop it. So anyway, you got a glimpse into my mind in addition to talking about this independent group. Have a nice day, I guess.